Layoff of federal workers, potentially. The president said yesterday that Democrats will be to blame if federal workers lose their jobs. Historically, though, in past shutdowns, workers have been furloughed, but they have not been laid off en masse. So wouldn't that be the president's call to lay people off?
As I've said repeatedly, Caitlin, this conversation about layoffs would not be happening right now if the Democrats did not vote to shut the government down. And as I also said last briefing as well, we are $37 trillion in debt, and the government is not receiving any cash. So someone has to look at the balance sheet and be good stewards of the American taxpayer dollar. And layoffs are an unfortunate consequence of that.
So the short answer is the Democrats are to blame. You can pick Chuck Schumer, you could pick Hakeem Jeffries, you could pick AOC, you could pick Cory Booker, you could pick Maxine Waters. Take your pick. You know, Ilhan Omar. And Caroline Leavitt is right. Somebody has to be a good steward and pay attention to the balance sheet. Speaking of which, I wanted to show you guys this one. Market Watch says gold is on the verge of reaching $4,000. What's behind its unstoppable rally? Let me know if you guys want to dive into that in a separate video. Just comment down below gold. And happy earnings week to those who celebrate. As we see here, all the companies starting today, Monday, October 6th, for the rest of the week, and the percentages here for beats.
I would encourage you as a reporter to go on the ground and to take a look at it for yourself, because there's been many members of the press, not press in this room, but independent journalists, some of whom we'll be inviting to the White House very soon to share their stories, because they have been in the middle of these riots and they have witnessed the anarchy that is taking place night after night. It's on video. You should play it on your show. You have a great opportunity on prime time on CNN to show your audience. Yeah, but you're probably talking to partisan Democrat officials who are opposed to everything this president does. You should also ask the people who live in Portland. We've actually heard from many members of the community who have said that this is complete civil disobedience. It's a mess. It's been loud. It's been troubling for neighbors in the community who are just trying to live peacefully. And these people are not there to peacefully protest. They are there to cause mayhem and havoc.
And Caroline Leavitt makes a great point. As we are speaking, or we're speaking about the earnings week, I'll have to forego showing you this footage unedited, because if not, there will be zero earnings on this video thanks to YouTube's community guidelines policy. But by all means, feel free, jump on X, go to Rapid Response 47, follow if you haven't followed already, and check it out for yourself. As they posted, here you go, Caitlin Collins, for your show, even though nobody will be watching, which is pretty much true. Their ratings are in the toilet. And if I don't forget, I'll put a link down below in the description if you guys want to go check that out.
Now look, Chuck Schumer and all the Democrats who voted against opening the government right now have said all this themselves. Chuck Schumer gave passionate speeches as recently as March of this year. I mean, roll the tape. He's the one that voted for the exact same CR, the exact same spending levels just 6 months ago, and said that we could not possibly shut the government down. He's changed his tune. And I mean, I'm not trying to be, mean about this, right? I respect Chuck Schumer as a person, but he's got a political problem that he's trying to solve using government funding for it. He's afraid, this is very clear and obvious to everybody, he's afraid he's going to get a challenge from his left flank in his next re-election bid. So he needs to show a fight against the President Trump and the Republicans, and he's chosen government funding for that. I think it's selfish. I think it's foolish, and I think it's hurting real Americans. We need to get the lights turned back on so we can finish the discussions on these substantive debates.
This is what you said at the time about that particular shutdown. Here it is.
We are willing to take what Senate Republicans have done in order to reopen the government so that we no longer are holding 800,000 federal workers hostage.
Well, that's exactly what you're doing right now. Hundreds of thousands of workers are being held hostage. What's changed from then to now?
Well, actually, Donald Trump is the president. Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. They could reopen the government if they chose to. The reality is...
Well, they would have to change the rules to be fair.
Well, that's correct.
The mistake that I made, and I made this early on, from all the movies that we see growing up, about heroes and villains is that I thought that fascist takeover attempts were going to be architected by evil geniuses. And I was not expecting how unearned, nepotistic, mediocre, and just dumb so many of the people architecting this were going to be. And it works because of brute force. Like, you can do anything through brute force, but it's not sophisticated and it does not merit my intellectual respect. That's my thought of the day.
I'm Vic Myers. Welcome to The Resistance. Project 2025 is almost halfway complete, folks, and most people don't even know it. That's why we need to talk about it again.
Rapidly, and it feels chaotic. But what I would offer you is what we are witnessing is the swift implementation of a plan that was decades in the making. Decades in the making. Project 2025 didn't just drop out of thin air. That's a product of decades of work. Federalist Society, Heritage Foundation. Understand that the implementation of a plan that's about trying to get rid of the Department of Education, deregulate industries, weaken the rule of law by over a period of time, creating a system and through gerrymandering states so that we would now have the Supreme Court that we have. This stuff didn't happen overnight. And it did not happen just because of an election in 2024 or even 2016. So when we talk about where the fight must go, there is the aspect of it that is about the immediate moment, such as the weight of the federal government being used to silence critics, citizens. And it must be about understanding that this did not just happen overnight, and we have to pay attention to an agenda that is not going to necessarily go away when this guy is finally termed out of office.
Well, let me ask you on that.
The mainstream media, you know, they've been bashing Kamala Harris as she's out on her book tour, and certainly there were things wrong with the campaign. Certainly Democrats have to figure out their messaging. But one thing that Democrats can never overcome is the reality that mainstream media ran with and continues to run with Donald Trump's blatant lies while gaslighting the American public and lecturing people like Kamala Harris, like Hillary Clinton, when they warn about true things. For example, Kamala Harris told Norah O'Donnell, who, you know, met her with all this skepticism, that she was a former prosecutor and that Project 2025 had Donald Trump's DNA all over it. At the time, by the way, we already knew that 140 people that were in Trump's orbit or had worked for Trump were part of Project 2025. So Politico called her out. USA Today had a piece saying that the vice president was being dishonest. None of that was accurate, and we now know that.
That was something
the president put on a social media post, a picture of Russ Vought, and said all eyes are on Russ Vought today. And I don't want to oversimplify what is so very not simple with the government shutdown, but effectively you have an OMB director out of the White House who is effectively running the federal government and making massive decisions here. They could potentially cripple some of these agencies, which we should be clear, as he wrote in Project 2025, he has argued that some of these agencies are too big and have hurt Americans. And so from his vantage point, he has been empowered by the president to move forward with these firings. And then on top of that are the cuts, the budget cuts, that he has been very clear that he has the power to decide what projects get allotted money. And as Speaker Johnson said yesterday, it is a subjective decision, one to advance this administration's priorities. And just this morning, in a tweet, Russ Vought, he made clear that there is another project specifically in Chicago that is set to, at least for now, get withholding of funds, saying $2.1 billion in Chicago infrastructure projects, specifically the Red Line extension and the Red and Purple modernization project, have been put on hold to ensure funding is not flowing via race-based contracting. Yesterday, he threatened 2 infrastructure projects here in New York. He threatened 16 other Democratic-led states in green energy projects. And when we're talking about this red line extension in Chicago, I know most people don't live in Chicago, but for those that do, this is a 5.5 mile extension that had been talked about for decades, went through this contracting process, and is currently moving forward up until this moment here. And this was a line that was a rail line that was going into the far south side of Chicago, a largely minority, low-income population that has never been served by a rail line to give them access to the rest of Chicago. These are the types of projects that we are talking about this White House using the shutdown to halt funding for.
Yeah, and it's taxpayer funding. It's American money.
And it's been contracted and previously contracted.
Now, if you go to the Project 2025 tracker at project2025.observer, you can see for yourself. They're already at 47% completion. If you've watched very many of my videos, you've heard me say more than once that what we're seeing isn't an accident, it's a plan. All of the radical actions of this administration, National Guard deployments, federal agencies dismantled, the Gestapo snatching people off the street, and the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, what I call the Trump tax, and the government shutdown even. This is the Project 2025 plan in motion.
Chad, Donald Trump and Republicans spent all of last year promising that they were going to lower the high cost of living. They also spent all of last year running away from Project 2025, acting like Project 2025 didn't exist. But what have they been doing this year? This year, they've done nothing. Zip, zero. Stingy with De Niro. Nothing to lower the high cost of living for everyday Americans. While at the same period of time, implementing and unleashing Project 2025. Now, all of a sudden, Donald Trump admits it was his project all along. He just did it earlier today. What we're saying is America's too expensive. Donald Trump has made things worse.
And a lot of people are under the misconception that Project 2025 was written just a couple of years ago, that Donald Trump, of all people, is the leader of it. Trump is obviously not the leader of Project 2025. I mean, the guy can barely read. The only evidence out there to suggest that he can write is a scribble of a signature and a cringeworthy birthday card. Nah, he's not the leader of Project 25. He's just a useful idiot. That's why the oligarchs love him. Because he doesn't have to understand their plan, he just has to sign it. The name most commonly associated with Project 2025 is Russell Vogt. But he's only 49 years old, and Project 2025 was conceived long before he was. He's just the guy who got the byline when the oligarchs decided it was time to make their treasonous plan public.
He was really a champion of the unitary executive theory, which suggests that the president should have absolute power over the entire federal government, basically. That he should be able to control independent agencies, that he should be able to populate the civil service with loyalists and purge the federal government of anybody who's not on board with his agenda. This government shutdown is creating the perfect storm for him to finally implement his agenda. He is getting the opportunity to basically fire potentially thousands of federal workers who he sees as not being sufficiently dedicated to, loyal to the president's policy agenda. And that won't just be a temporary change. It'll be a pretty significant power grab by the president that could remake the federal bureaucracy for a long time into the future.
Project 2025 itself comes straight out of the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society. The same network of institutions that have been shaping American politics for decades. The Heritage Foundation was officially started in 1973. From Nixon on, every administration, Republican or Democrat, has been shaped by it, either by adopting its policies or battling against them. I mean, Reagan's most significant contribution to society before becoming president was acting in a show about a man and his chimpanzee. His policies were all given to him by Heritage. Welfare reform in the 90s, Heritage. The individual mandate in the Affordable Care Act, that was a Heritage Foundation policy first written as their conservative alternative to single-payer health care. The Democrats adapted it thinking, hey, maybe it'll get us some bipartisan support. It didn't. But then it was struck down by Federalist Society judges with the help of heritage amicus briefs. An amicus brief is when outside groups file legal arguments to try and sway the court's decision. The Federalist Society was founded in '82. It grew out of the same network as Heritage, the same donors, the same allies, the same leaders. Together, they were instrumental in putting in place judges from district courts all the way to the Supreme Court, the very people needed to uphold the power structure behind 2025. All you have to do to see this effect is compare court behaviors toward Biden versus Trump. When Biden used emergency powers to provide student debt relief, the court said that he was exceeding congressional intent. When Trump spent money that Congress explicitly denied, for instance, the border wall, the courts deferred to presidential authority or just plain refused to stop him. When Biden used his regulatory authority given by Congress to address climate change, the court blocked him. When Trump dismantled congressionally mandated agencies, the court deferred. These are just two of many examples.
Let me bring you to today. President Trump posts on social media he's meeting with Vote today, quote, to determine which of the many Democratic agencies he recommends to be cut and whether or not those cuts will be temporary or permanent.
Donald Trump told us that he wanted to be a dictator. Donald Trump told us he wanted retribution. Donald Trump lied about not knowing anything about Project 2025. But as he tweets out today, he's fully aware of what it is because it is executing a strategy within his own administration. This moment right now, this shutdown is part of the plan. It works. It may just happen to time out a certain way, but that's always been the end game, to stress test the system to the breaking point where we now at a situation where they will indiscriminately fire thousands, hundreds of thousands of federal employees with no intent of bringing them back, and certainly consolidating that power in Donald Trump. Folks, this is the big setup for 2028. Don't be stupid. See what's in front of you because it's happening, and they expect by the time we get there, you will be immune to any charges that this is fascism, that this is not the American way, this is unconstitutional.
So we have decades-old organizations developing and working on a plan. We have a useful idiot, and we have one arm dictating policy while another controls the courts. And that's how decades of planning became today's reality, a government run by oligarchs, enforced by judges, and fronted by a showman. That's where we're at today. And the bad news is that with Project 2025 being almost 50% complete already, it remains a significant and existential threat to American democracy. This is something that we cannot forget. It's something that we must keep at the forefront of American discourse and resistance. But here's the good news. The foundations of Project 2025 began well over 50 years ago. It was designed by a group of people living in an age of analog media. They had no concept of the technology we have today, the communication resources we have today, or our ability to connect with each other and form communities that we do now. This playbook was written for a world that no longer exists. Ours is a world of instant communication, grassroots organizing, and a people who can out-connect, out-share, and out-organize them. That's why we still have hope. That's why Project 2025 can be defeated, because democracy isn't just a system. It's us. It's our voices, our votes, our communities, our refusal to give up. They built their blueprint in secret, and we'll defeat it in the open, together. So share this, talk about it, organize, because silence is their weapon, and ours is our voice. Thanks for listening. Good day.
And it works because of brute force. Like, you can do anything through brute force, but it's not sophisticated and it does not merit my intellectual respect. That's my thought of the day.
Speaking of useful idiots, AOC signing off by picking boogers out of her nose on her TikTok reel. And, the Democrats definitely, speaking of architecture and silence and a voice and share this, share that, I think the difference is what's being shared, the lies that are being told, the truths that we are trying to expose.
Is it the case that, as Pritzker frames it, you are profiling brown people, that this immigration crackdown is designed to go after people of color?
It's such a, oh, what a dumb question. The illegal aliens who are here are taking jobs away from blacks, they're taking jobs away from whites, they're taking jobs away from Latinos, they're taking their health benefits away, they're taking their school slots away, and of course in many cases they're committing heinous crimes. We cannot have a system of law in this country that privileges illegal aliens over American citizens, and that's what they're doing. You know it, and I know it.
So that's not exactly a no, Stephen. Can you just unequivocally state that the immigration policy... I said it's a dumb question. Okay. Well, I appreciate that, but
it's a dumb question.
So no, this policy is not designed to... I thought
when I said it was a dumb question, it meant no.
Well, I just want to be clear and precise. I appreciate you trying to qualify my questions, but nevertheless, I think it's a fair one that a lot of people have.
My full answer is no, that is a lie, and it's a dumb question.
Over a weekend. What?
The Insurrection Act, under what conditions or terms would you...
Well, I'd do it if it was necessary. So far it hasn't been necessary, but we have an Insurrection Act for a reason. If I had to enact it, I'd do that. If people were being killed and courts were holding us up, or governors or mayors were holding us up, sure, I'd do that. I mean, I want to make sure that people aren't killed. We have to make sure that our cities are safe.
You hear that? We have to make sure our cities are safe. However, Democrats, for instance, Hillary Clinton, says that if states' rights mean anything, they must include the right to not get invaded by another state in peacetime. Americans everywhere speak up and stand against Trump's outrageous assault on Illinois and Oregon, but the invasion has already occurred. That's the wild and crazy part about it. The same invasion that in a previous life, Hillary Clinton would have been all for, the same actions and steps that are being taken right now by President Donald Trump.
Yes, sir, because you're standing up. Go ahead.
Jeffrey just challenged you to debate on the House floor today. Do you see yourself debating him, or would you be
when the poll says that about 13% of the people approve of your messaging, then you make desperate pleas for attention, and that's what Hakeem Jeffries has done. Look, my friend Hakeem had his shot. We debated all this on the House floor, as you know, before we passed our bill. He spoke for 7 or 8 minutes. He had all of his colleagues lined up. They gave it their best shot, and they argued, and they stomped their feet and screamed at us and all that. And still, we passed the bill in bipartisan fashion and sent it over to the Senate. The House has done its job. I'm not going to let Hakeem try to pretend for these theatrics. I mean, this is a Chuck Schumer decision. The ball is in the Senate's court now. The House has done this. We don't need to waste time on that nonsense. Those debates have been had. Hakeem is a friend and a colleague. I respect him, but we all know what he's trying to do there. Yes, sir.
Mr. President, we're now in day 6 of the Democrats' government shutdown. Day 6. And I'm wondering just what exactly Democrats think they're gaining from all of this. I guess they're getting points from the far-left interest groups that they've been coordinating their shutdown strategy with. But I highly doubt that they're earning a lot of points with everyday, hardworking Americans, like the voters that they lost in the last election. Mr. President, a Reuters headline from Thursday noted, and I quote, U.S. government shutdown threatens food aid program for low-income Americans. Let me just read that again, Mr. President. U.S. government shutdown threatens food aid program for low-income Americans. The article noted that while the Trump Agriculture Department is doing its best to continue administering the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, more commonly known as WIC, the program is, quote, critically low on funds. And it won't get new funds until Democrats agree to reopen the government. Mr. President, Democrats own this. They own any lapse in funding for critical food aid programs, just as they own every other negative effect of the shutdown. Because let's remember, Mr. President, the only reason the government is shut down is because Democrats refuse to accept a clean, nonpartisan funding extension. A clean, nonpartisan funding extension. We didn't ask Democrats to swallow any new Republican policies. We didn't ask them to swallow any partisan riders. We simply asked them to agree to a clean, nonpartisan bill. The same kind of bill, Mr. President, I might add, that they voted for 13 times. 13 times during the Biden administration. The Democrats said no. And I should note, Mr. President, that you don't have to take my word for it on the facts of the bill. Republicans aren't the only ones pointing out that this is a clean CR. Here's what the president of the Teamsters Union had to say the other day, and I quote, "A shutdown will hurt working people, period. Senators should pass the House-passed clean, short-term funding bill," end quote. Senators should pass the House-passed clean, short-term funding bill, end quote. Again, that from the president of the Teamsters Union. Or, you could take the word of a mainstream journalist who recently noted, and I quote, "In a vacuum, this CR would get almost every Democrat vote." It just would. This is a clean CR that has no partisan riders, extends a bunch of programs that are Democrat priorities. It's clean. It's clean, Mr. President. So to summarize, Democrats have shut down the government because they refuse to accept a clean, nonpartisan bill. And why are they refusing to accept it? After all, as I mentioned, they supported similar bills 13 times during the Biden administration. The reason that they refuse to accept it is that Democrats still cannot get over the fact that the American people elected President Trump. And when their far-left base demanded a showdown with the president, Democrats fell in line. And now it's the American people who are suffering the consequences. I quote again, U.S. government shutdown threatens food aid program for low-income Americans. Threatens food aid program for low-income Americans. Mr. President, 3 Democrats have rejected their party's shutdown politics and voted with Republicans to reopen the government. All Democrats will get another chance to vote to reopen the government later today. And for the sake of the American people, I hope at least a few more Democrats will join us to pass this clean, nonpartisan CR and let the Senate get back to work.